Thus I have heard. At one time the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son of the lineage trained who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Shariputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness and have no characteristics. They are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure, and they neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times and relied upon the perfection of wisdom and become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata, Om Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasangate, Bodhi Sopa. Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Noble Avalokiteshvara, that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage of the soul. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra, the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
Dozo gyala buji dazi yala zhuji yangden song. Dodo che zhu nyemu nyelong leji jadu zhuzi jin. Mare minzi dongen nyungu jini junzi rejo nong. Denen daji saji dazi yungden lezo jasi doyen kong. Jara juda chuni jere dali mis jambe yana de arabaza nani arabaza nani arabaza nani zede jeje chera zeje Dali demo me ba ra se ne ka da de je jong lo do ba ye lo zhe bo be no zo do on zo zo je de ye je jo ye je ye me ye do do ye re ye ro ye re yang le xin lo ji lo so wa de shang bo tong mi yin jian nang zhe de jiu de de yue de dang zhou bian bian zai zhuang ge se le nian si lian bo yao jie shi bian ji lo so wa de yao ye yu mi shun ji le zhu dong dao wa zhou bo ji bian ge zhuo jie sang jie gun zhong bo bo yang se su fa ma da yue jie lo su de xie zhuo dang bie zhong a de xiang ga dang dian bie min bo zhong de jie nian jiu nan xie gu jie song la su ga dang la ma nang la su de hang jie xin de zi jie zhong a ba me do ri bie wang shu jie zhe jie dang a dian bie dao bo ke zhu jie se ju ba jie la su de zhao su ge de la ma du jie chang kan la kan de xin nian zhi zong nian 秋冬听梦无主自自别，只见老母弄了所的，就让教所罗跟了大爷面，给上他把这边用求，在月这边他给这把也，现在新年弄了所的。借我更多养到那么多，这面去这边了弄时间，撒当浪就应得要做呢，多接强给我。年到肉上节去当做的就能弄，想求不多到年就做的，那个去节这边做那的，若那平时上节就不就上节去当做的就能想。就不多到年就做的，那个去节这边做那的，若那平时上节就不就上节就做节就能那想就不多到年就做的。大概去节这边做那的，若那平时上节就不就。哎，哎呀，哎呀，那最近我做那件，你同大人的小娃，你同嘛就把死了吧，同嘛跟了就把的。你个
As usual, let's begin with completing two activities. So, two activities referring to the cultivation or motivation in the beginning and the dedication at the end. So, at this moment, it is beginning of our receiving of our teaching. So, we will be engaging in cultivating motivations.
啊，当个就同嘛跟了。
关能的看得到，国美呢？
够的，俺这要够的。俺这当的我这边桥通的，俺这看桥通的嘛，俺这俺桥通，俺没桥是。过去了的。但是俺这俺们这里桥通的，但是看个的桥的嘛，俺这通名个是桥是。
When Rinpoche is speaking, if you guys can you guys see very clearly on a full screen Rinpoche's image?
Yes.
You want to see? 그래서 동구민도 사, 샴바직 동도 사.
没什么的，俺这当的阿玛克罗的，去通桥通的看嘛，都俺桥通的没个桥是。
我今年Rinpoche你동도 그냥 공소学员吧，공소 동구민도 사, Rinpoche 친구만 동구민도.
That's what the nature of the Nare to coincide the Zonget.
Oh, injury.
Call Zolada.
You can fix, can you fix that? Is anyone who can fix this?
His image
He
is
has
fine.
it's a spotlight. He has a spotlight on him.
Yeah, he should be the only one visible for most people.
I think that there might be an issue with iPads. It sounds like.
Yeah, I only see Ken.
Tianma 동문도 자본서 강가 나 림부체 제도 야고
That's a very camera.
나 림부체 세부체 나가라 전부 제도 예.
Touch it.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I dropped the
Yeah,
spotlight
yeah.
and re-added him, so.
Yeah, we've
Okay.
had to do some stuff, but yeah, I see him.
Okay.
That is. Yeah. Did you? That in the Tangas of Tendijan, Tangas of Kinoche city, and it Chetan Kariche or Kinoche in Sanata, language Pevala, and it Chagi that they make on a Chetan language go. Then I that's on your mind by as of course by any church in a Yawa in Zane, and it church Casa, children on the Dani, Lu children on the Tibama, the Samba children in Sigur, the kitchen.
So what is meant by cultivating appropriate motivations at the beginning to receive the teachings of the Dharma? So here now, it is not really important that you be physically, participating in receiving the teachings, but the mentally participating the receiving of the teaching is very, very important. So therefore, in order for one to mentally participate in receiving the teachings of the Dharma, one must first cultivate motivations.
Tanga Tendi children in Sivala. You charge an agate, ranking danger, Nakatani line, Dumba to be on Bola, Rigibi Lamana, according to me. And the Rangi Tagoda and Randa Ranyambi, and Sanjana, Jerani, Treasure Pamachi. And the Dewa de Judu Meshe, Dongaman de Japan Meshebi, Nit the Regus and the Tayabi Sanjay, Jordan Retechas and Dinner Sugar Lamacho, Najimate each day, Cheranson, the Retechas, Biman, Cheranson with Yandate, Maharangi, Duguin, say, any kilometer rich Chegida.
So now let's begin cultivating motivations by visualizing Buddha Shakyamuni in front of oneself, surrounded by all the lineage gurus of Lam Rim, and being yourself in their presence, surrounded by entire sentient beings, and think about that just as we ourselves do not wish to, do not wish for suffering, and do not wish to suffer, but we always long to achieve happiness. However, due to the lack of understanding the cause which that leads to happiness and overcome sufferings, we undergo sufferings uncontrollably. So now today, in the presence of the Buddhas, and may I cultivate this immaculate motivations for the benefit of all other sentient beings. So therefore, let's take a couple of minutes on it to meditate for.
여기 교는 치바지는 나네 간선 바세 아니 다 사송지 좀 세나리 되자 아니 강라 강되게니 되는 당체되니 지 주발라 마노와다 마상와 되게 아니 상주랑저는 바 송샤난디 살아
So, with these motivations, the teachings we are receiving today is the lamp for the dispelling the darkness of the three worlds, which is great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment. And it's a very fortunate for all of us to be able to receive such immaculate teachings, which actually complete and correct instructions for accomplishing one's own purpose, which is the state of enlightenment.
다 된게 치바세 용되게 토마 점보 세나리 안덤바 투명 번에 랑게 전체 자이 남이 바데 라마나제 난타시 바치 사제 동보데
So to cover the first outlines as usual, think about this immaculate teachings as actually, coming from the root teacher, who is the teachings Buddha himself, and transmitted to his disciples, and all the way to one's own root guru. In other words, these teachings as an unbroken lineage or the blessings, beginning from the Buddha all the way to one's own root teacher.
그게 진행제에 용되게 체화 가려요래 세네 용된 유된 가려요래 송아되지
So if this is the case, then the next it goes to what is the greatness of this particular teachings then?
다른 데저게 라마자 첨보다 용자 첨보니 라인에 가서게 데릴 것을 봐봐. 근데 친이 저거요나 친이 가르쳐 버려.
So then such a precious teacher who taught this precious teachings, if we were following this teachings and the teacher, and how do we follow this teacher, and how do we follow the teachings of this teacher?
다 되게 용자 첨보다 라인에 되게네 디자 산제살을 간제체는 트그레서는 자이 사제니 아니 동보 아니 라마노한테 비게 신이 때네 아니 용될 토산제 그래서 하지.
So how do we then gain a state of enlightenment? By means of relying upon these teachings and the teachers. So therefore, which will then followed by one of the very important outlines of two outlines, in other words, how do we rely on the teacher, the guru, which is the root of one's spiritual path, and having relied upon the root guru, how do we listen and train one's own mind by following his teachings?
다 때내로 제다장이 발라니 대이되나 힘보는 비시 그거도 힘보 제다는 비치니 다 동물지사 다 힘보 제다는 비치들라니 제랑지 나자는 바제보다 힘보는 증거지 다 동물지사 다 힘보는 증거들 송 주부 충분도 되모에 랑지는 반영선은 주부 제도 되모에 랑지는 반영선은 주부 첨비 랑지 반영선은 지혜지 다 동물인지사 다 주부 첨비 랑지는 반영선은 질라 자 제 송원제 대전은 주고 고당바 센제 코나 템바 센데 제다지비 센제네 쇼발로 로즈에제 다디니는 동번이 된지사 더 센제네 쇼발로 로즈에라 송원제 네 센제네 쇼발로 로그베 전세 아니 로바레레와로 로베 산제면 주고 템바 네 로바니라 로바스 다디노게 다다 아니 샹추기 센제네 아니 터시 체바진이라 간데
So now we're on under the particular chapter. We're on the particular chapter that how to learn the bodhisattvas after developing the spirit of enlightenment which has 3 parts, which begins the first part, which the reason why we must learn the trainings after developing the spirit of enlightenment. The second, demonstrating that you will not become a Buddha by learning either method or the wisdom separately. And the third is this explanation of this process of learning the precepts. So we are under the explanation of the process of learning the precepts. So normally when we speak about Tawa Dan Jeba, which means view and conduct. So the view here refers view is in general, the view is what is known as something that requires a critical analysis of how things really are. And the conduct here refers to that doesn't require much analysis, but rather single-pointed understanding of that particular thing. However, at this point, when we speak about the view and conduct, the view and conduct here refers to the wisdom realizing emptiness and bodhicitta, the cultivation of bodhicitta. So those two are the view and conduct in this particular context. So then also sometimes we will also find in the certain texts where it says Taoiso, which means the mirrors of view, the mirrors of the view, which refers to the wisdom realizing emptiness. And then the Jibezo, which refers to the accumulation of mirrors, accumulation of insight and accumulation of mirrors. So now we are continuing from the textbook here, the Lam Rim book is page 98, beginning from second paragraphs, which says, you achieve omniscience from a number of causes, each of which is insufficient by itself. So know that the following sort of person is a teacher of non-virtues who blocks the door to the two collections. Someone who says hundreds of the birds are driven out with single stone from a slingshot, and who attends a fortunate life of leisure and should then take advantage of it in many ways, but rather does not train in anything other than one specific aspect of the path. So during our previous teachings, if you look at that the 98 itself, the paragraphs, it says here beginning from 97, accordingly, well, you must loosen the bounds, the last paragraphs of the 97, where it says, accordingly, well, you must loosen the bounds of the afflictions and the conceptions of the sign of true existence. You must be firmly bound by the rope of ethical trainings, and well, you need to eradicate both kinds of the misdeeds that are wrong by nature and deeds that are wrong by the prohibitions.
Tele gong de dong mo jo do dang zi gi jin wa de le go re si ji ji ani lo bi ta ba dang go re lo ba nyang sa len go re se de len se ji song de len se ma da song du de.
So here now, what it says is now we need to loosen the rope of the self-grasping, but we need to one need to embrace the rope of the other practices.
De ji ani kana ma to ani se de nga so rang xin ji kana ma to de che bi kana ma to ani rang xin ji de ba dang da ka sa ani lo bu de che bi de ba so de se go re de ri ro.
So then here, once again, well, let's talk about it. Is well, what we need is we need to bind ourselves by the ethical trainings, but we need to loosen ourselves of the grasping itself. And then here we also talked about the misdeeds or the negative deeds. It is wrong by nature, and then the negative deeds, it is wrong by prohibitions.
Daniel Ranshi Kana to any de Shiba said the Mapa go Magore, and Gail Hosana Yoba Gore, Mashiba Gore Sondoa. Does it number the Shagoda?
So this needs to be abandoned, and then we also need to understand the difference between the two of what are the deeds that is wrong by nature, what are the deeds that are wrong by prohibitions.
That do the Tarandua, Lobby, Lobby Dangores. Lobason Yanagi Dangore, Danzi Chiwande, and Logores, Mechichi Sondoa.
And also it mentions here, you must not eradicate the virtuous activities, being bounded by the ethical trainings, and being bounded by the conceiving signs of the true existence are not the same. And loosening the safeguarding of vows and loosening the chain of conception of the self are not the same either. So very clear, yeah.
But you want the Tangitere, Matsuki, Tonji Chimba said, Jutamale to a Sanjay Yokoho said, Ju Masama, but Jutamale to go roas. Jutamale to go a Kashitila Kashi Tower de Kone, and Jirewa Chiki Chogoro Pena, and Shaja de Udochi Techoros and the Loayana, and the Tonji Chimon Goji, Tony Yos Zoban Goji, and Migi Shis Ribasha Sondoa.
So here now, what it says is now you must achieve omniscience from a number of causes. In order to achieve state of omniscience, one that requires a numerous causes and conditions, and not just a one cause, which will the single cause which leads oneself to the state of omniscience, but rather it requires numerous causes and conditions. But the others, the other positions where it stated that, it says, the hundreds of the birds are driven out with a single stone from a slingshot, and so this is their examples. It doesn't require a lot of different causes and conditions, but just by a single cause that can which enables one to gain the state of enlightenment. However, it's not so from our own side. Whatever that you said, just but single cause which leads oneself to the state of enlightenment is completely wrong. But rather, those are the obstacles for the door to enlightenment.
That's because Baba take to be land, Corona Cosmo Qualiana, and Toba Risata Chanso Card and G. Yellow Machine, Chico and Ansan and Jigris and the Lobaroa.
So this is what the Hashan's position, where he has already stated in our earlier during our we have already gone through that during our previous teachings, that he is Hashang has firmly stated that the conceptions, whatever that may be, so whether positive or negative, so long as this is conception, it needs to be stopped. It needs to be eradicated, whether it is virtuous or non-virtuous. And it requires only a single pointed concentration on the nothingness as the one which leads oneself to the state of enlightenment. However, we are refuting that particular position.
Tepa chungani mege nadra yin la, nyinse yu dene shorewa yinbi shoro sondo ade.
So now, let's read through the text here. Also, the difference between the Hinayana or Mahayana comes down to whether its practitioners train in the limitless collections at the time of putting the teachings into the practice, because the modest vehicle and the Hinayanas are synonymous. Modest vehicle, modest vehicle. Ephemeral, I think this is more, yeah, it says modest, and the Hinayana are synonymous, and the meaning of the modest is partial, yeah, and you must achieve even lesser, current result, food, drink, like that, through many causes and conditions. So it is quite wrong to hold something, the partial is sufficient to achieve the person's highest purpose. Buddhahood is the nature of
Tanga sugi te na yung na sebo shuyo jiro, tepa checho se de, tepa meba de, tepa cho se de yang, tanya ge de do jene, nga so, tanda ji, takanchi tepa se kora, zo diyu de na nyasa lengi to sa la yang, ji, ta jimbo meba so, tongchu che ge, tanya kora se ba. Dene me, da kao su baba, kono rangi, yung kono rangi kwa len de aro, tepa chewa de, tepa chungwa se nge de, tepa chungwa se de, nyane sewa jenge de la, tepa chungwa se gre, nyane tayaba se nge de la, tepa chenpa se gre son do.
So here now, it says the difference between the Mahayana and Hinayanas. Here it says Mahayanas come down to the whether its practitioners train in limitless collections at the time of putting the teachings into practice. So then the Maudiyas or the Hinayana their practice is limited. In other words, their practice is limited and partial. So therefore, the primary difference between the two is based on their nature of their practice. One is limitless and one is limited.
Yung Chenmo tanda la lonjo je de tanya de kwa mani wa yina ji chome ge yawa de shen ro de ji kansa ge chome yawa de kwa de ma nyane wa yina ni golo Chenmo se yu do.
So we are not actually refuting or we are nor and neither we are criticizing the either Hinayana practitioner or the Mahayana practitioners. We're just differentiating the nature of the practice between the two. So therefore, this is very important. Sometimes we may get there's a danger of getting misunderstanding by saying that the Maurya's practitioner or the Hinayana practitioner, Mahayana practitioners, and we tend to have some kind of, making some kind of discriminations between the two, which is completely, which is, not right at all.
Tata jebu me ba saton la so ba la jeje doma shi ge drugo ba na jibi denji cho sanje do ba la shore cho ban zemba ne merite sondo te lo sa de gen lo sa de
So ye ma lo sho rum che shu a
Yeah.
Again, didn't Majilogi lost Sasha, there's lost again. I think I overread earlier, so I'll read once again here again. You must achieve even a lesser current result, food, drink, and the like, through many causes and conditions. So it is quite wrong to hold that something partial is sufficient to achieve person's highest purpose, Buddhahood for its nature of the Buddhahood.
Jibu jiwi jes sheba tenre ji chunyi bi shoro sondu tere. Nyanga chubu shuru.
So here it says, for its nature of dependent arising, that results are made in accordance with their causes. Something that's very, very significant here.
Tero tanga soge jibu ji tenre sete ko yugubi nezi tona tachi cheyare mato ji sanje ge somba na jibu tamba ji jebare se jenda menjawa je. Jibu jenda ge tenre ge jesa rambare sete yugi tenre onsen ware mato kansa onsen ba mare. Di chunyi sete.
So here what it says here is now, for it's the nature of dependent arising, that results are made in accordance with their causes. So here, what it actually, says here is now, what cause that give rise to that result. It's really depends upon what kind of result that that coming into being. It is entirely upon and dependent upon what kind of causes and conditions, and the nature of result is completely contingent upon its causes and condition. It is not something that we decide what kind of causes and condition, but the causes and condition is a dependent arising. It is this is how they are. That need to be understood.
Pero ngazu juzangela debazang 가르치는 용어를 쓰는 개체시와이나 지금 어떻게 집어제는 집어에 집어제는 누구는 세도고 인샤샤도 권로 쓰기도 하. 되지 말아. 그 도도면 주기 제선 접을 조거데 도도면 봐 춘일에 송도 하.
So here now it says the result are made in accordance with the cause. Once the cause is complete, then the result giving rise to its result. It is a natural. There's nothing that we could actually stop coming into being, bringing forth its result once the cause is completed.
맞추게 다다 지 칼라를 비다지 자동을 소바지 조거나 제 도마치 만디버 시 칼라데 시고 작으면도 와. 대 작으면 아니 저번에 야쇼초도 저번에 준탄소면 버지랑가 같이다 가대 용시 그래. 세더라.
So here now, everything that whatever that is result, that it's actually coming from not a single cause. It's all of those results coming into being existence, dependent upon numerous causes and conditions. Just like for instance, when we cook a food, to become a delicious food, it requires a lot of causes and conditions. There's not one single cause which can bring forth its result, which is a really delicious food. And so suddenly, when speaking about the high state of enlightenment, requires a numerous causes and conditions, but not the single cause which give rise to the state of enlightenment.
맞지 배 좋다고 쇼게니 대두대 땡제라 땡바네 아니 타투 오마에 탄저하게 또배 따상지 땡제지 받아 시시데 아니 땡제 코너 이지 땡데 땡네 용어 생이데 유대는 원세와도 고고로.
So here now, unlike the other lower schools of philosophical thoughts of the lower school, here the Madhyamaka Prasangika standpoint, everything is dependently designated. Everything that's coming into being is all due to by depending upon either its own causes and condition, or either it's dependent upon parts, or dependent upon its conceptions and imputations of thoughts and term.
다 저런 맞춰서 취지 진이까지 뭐 땡땡이라 상대 주세요데 간제 땡땡이 라와데 계속나 아니 tempo yomare tini mapin sala than degree.
So
Ko
therefore, by Lama Tsongkhapa stated, and it's everything that our understanding is out of dependent originations, then our understanding is completely wrong. So therefore, making sure that your understanding is really being in the bondage of the dependent originations.
Nghe de loi ba chu de nanga chim de ka hi ka jil ta je loi ba de bu ji de de ji chun yin bi shi de se de pe nanga chim bo ka se na ma zo za za la chu ta se de ji ka sa ji ta wa mi ro ni ka ji nga zu pa ji be ji ne ko shi mi ro sang ye de ge ke che de le so na de de go de bo tu bu de ta gro de de go de bo tu so na khu ko shi de se ma ni de ba de se ma yi tin ko no ro go pe ke che bo.
So here, I always encourage the readers. Here, it is always important to highlight those important lines or the important sentences or the paragraphs that we may find. Particularly here, it says, for its nature of dependent arising, that results are met in accordance with the cause. So that is very, very important. So you can highlight it, and it would be easy for one to, find a letter, because when we speak about the dukkha, which is the philosophical standpoint or the tenet, in other words, we should not have an understanding of the tenet. It's something that is a way of understanding. It is something that is a custom of understanding of such lineage. This, however, is not so. When speaking about the tenets, the Buddhist philosophical tenets, it always talked about how things really are, in what way that you have understanding of how things really are is what is meant by dukkha or the tenet.
De la gon ni je pe ma ka bo le chang ni se we zhu ba dang ta da ba zhu ba song so de xin xie ba jie wan zhong yin do le chang gang de xin xie ba nang zhong wa de ne ji ju bu ma yin no ji xie xie na jie jie yu se da de xin xie ba na ne yang da ba zhu bi ju ce me ba je bu bon cha ji yang da ba zhu de ju gang xie na de da de si na dang yi xie ji zuo ce me mengwa ba yang da bi je dang xie jia qin xie ba dang zhen ma me ba zha bi den ba le jiang ni zhu ba da song du de de si mo de de ba de lo xia ge me jie zhu ba da de xin xie bi gu ne si na jia le nge ba jie so ge yu qiu tang jie la nge ba jie so ge yu lang ce me ba le nge ba jie so xie jie ba xie dong gu bu lu zhu ji jiang song du de ba de.
So now let's read through the text here again. With this in mind, the Buddha said in the Lotus of Compassion Sutra, or the Karuna Pundarika Sutra, that something partial comes from what is partial, and something total comes from what is total. This is explained at length in the Sutra on the coming forth, the Tathagatas, the Tathagata Topati Samudbhava, or the Sambhava. So none of the Tathagatas arose from a single cause. Why? A conqueror's child, Tathagata, are established from 10 times 100,000 immeasurable establishing causes. What are the 10? They are this: the genuine cause of not being as satisfied with the immeasurable collections of the merit and sublime wisdoms. This is also explained at length in the teachings of the Vimalakriti. Oh friend, the bodies of the Tathagatas are produced from hundreds of meritorious deeds, from all virtues, from immeasurable virtuous path.
되지. 되게 단지 가는 로 나기 준년 세워 질는 지금 말에 주 타다 버질러 호그래서 시제기 농을.
So this is the uh, the quotations that are quoting from the sutras that requires immeasurable causes and conditions for achieving the state of complete enlightenment, not just a one cause or something that is limited cause which give rise to the state of enlightenment.
맞게 용되는 뭐 지시제인데 자타도 동차세데 고 인지미지 자인의 자인거 동의 동의거 개체대 레모도 용 고고도 오비
Para test chess rumche de nga test chess de para ya chess sungya wo gomo rumche.
되는 맞게 이게라 된 본차 줄어서 봐서 son도아 아니 들었으니까 용 첨부기 지시제인데 변에 자타래 본차래 제타래 세요데 체 변에 지인의 저다다 인거 자인의 자다다 인거 레모도 라소비 비슷한 고고.
So, so when we find in the text where it says like 100,000 immeasurables and 10,000s and 10 million times and so on and so forth, we often find those numbers in the text. That doesn't necessarily mean that is a that is a definite number that is mentioning in the teachings in the text, but rather it actually talks about. It requires innumerable. It has to be a definite number of 10,000 million, but rather it actually talks about the way of saying that it requires innumerable causes and conditions.
되지. 당가 저 노디는 되게 강연 노디게 동저지 주어에나 가르사나 아니 선나도 저 타예바 거래 예시지 저 타예바 거래 손이 타예비 돈에 아니 저거 타예바지 비그래 세들이.
So in brief, to summarize, in other words, to summarize the meaning of the particular explanation that we have covered up until now today, immeasurable accumulations of the merits and immeasurable or the infinite accumulations of the insights are necessary to have an immeasurable result or the infinite result.
고볼루도 지장한체 강세 산제 그 산제 주고이 제야 대단 제대신 제메 대체 추주고 제제 말에 제다 제도요 제송소선도 고볼루도.
So here, what it says, and the protector Nagarjuna also says in his precious garden, when the cause of even a Buddha's embodiment of form have no measure as with the world, how then could there be a measure of the cause of the embodiment of truth?
되지. 되게 된다 가르쳐는 무슨 지나되는 서로 제대기 뉘지 요소 조박이 대다기 저도 장카다 뒤도 되게 계셔서나 다 렌제지 나자데 차신 타워 요소 진의 셰투 말해서 오라 다 늘지 레서는 저바체 두고 말해서.
So 지딩 이내지 용서
제대기 뉘지게 대다 대시샤와 저도 제보 말에 저대 대시샤와 산조 뒤에 대다 대시샤와 산조라서나 신도는 참모진의 제투고 말해서.
So if it is, when we speak about how this, the environments and the beings within the environments are coming into being, what kind of causes and conditions of environment and environment and the beings within the environments are, are resulted. If we were to ask these questions, then here we can't really specifically, pinpoint the causes of all of this. Until we have you have a correct or the precise understanding of law of cause and effect.
단 지대게 뉴지기 지대다 되게 샤워데 셰데 메와이나 아니 산제 구수기 지다 아니 간데 셰토 거래서.
So if one is unable to unable to measure, or if one is unable to identify the causes and conditions of the mundane existence, such as environment and beings within the environments, then suddenly how can we measure the cause of the Buddha's body?
지당 가서 데려와. 근데 동반이래 렌제진 저와 차신 타와 데려와. 렌제진 저와 차신 타와데 시지 차신 타와. 가서 렌제진 저와 차신 타와로 뭐버데 시지 차신 타와에서는 파신테만 송으로. 렌제진 저와 차신 타와 보나 아니 시지 바차다 저 방거스네. 뒤진 가서 차셔데 렌제진 저와 시그래.
So when we speak about the subtlety between the emptiness and law of cause and effect, the law of cause and effect is said to be the more much subtler than the emptiness. So here it says one of the most subtlest obscuration to omniscience is the obscuration to omniscience is the defilement of law of cause and effect.
데이터베이터도 실어지 파로드 심바 주기 뒤발라 로바네 하시바다 하다 파로드 심바 이게 팀모와 예데 하지 종 체와 되만에 자야 칸다 라이 거바 진이지 쇼바 탕지 나게 센지 예데라 시바 데 시비체 신주다 상쇼 소데다 돈이 주루라 소비 파로드 심바 심비 랑용수 조발라 양네 양도 시비 셔로 송도.
So here it says now, this training in method and wisdom comprising the 6 perfections is explanation earlier, common to both mantra and perfection vehicle. For in many of the tantric classic, we find repeated mentions of the complete path of the perfections, the 6 perfections, the 37 branches of enlightenment, the 16 emptiness, etc.
되지. 벤내가 좀 쉬우래. 맞은 데를 도와. 그 연대시지만 팀몰로서 해도 저번에 태박인지 조지 도지 태 생이데. 되게 내가 된되는 저거래. 되지.
So we find in the Yönten Shigurma, which is the foundation of all good qualities by Lama Tsongkhapa, which it says that Tumo Lamjang ne di gyobana tabo kunji chogyo dojitek. Tumo Lamjang, becoming oneself, becoming oneself, or in order transforming oneself into the suitable vessel of receiving or practicing the common path. Having practiced the common path by transforming oneself into the suitable vessel of the common path, one then enters into the supreme vehicle of the Vajrayana.
되지. 지당 가서 되지는 팀모에서 됐어도 소위 팀모에서 내가 가서 지당 지대게 타녀코로 팀모로서 녀도 잘라는 주 고거로.
So here the common path. What is common path? The common means we're talking about something that can share by another thing, right? That's what is meant by common.
anga sujonda ya tani jeri juparo be tepasena kare ya juparo de shi be tepaina ta debu ji me wala jol maro na debu yo sa yo maro kai karsa jon ta pasin tepasena re juparo de be sa jugi mi ta ne ya dreso wore.
So here we have if it says now the common to the both mantra and perfection of the common, complete path of the perfection, the sixth perfection, and etc. So here, the perfection, the path of perfection is said to be the cause which gives rise to the path of mantra, the mantra path, in other words. So whatever the practice that we may undertake, whether it is a perfection practice, or another sutra, or this perfection practice, or the practice of the sacred mantrayana, so the practice must be understood in terms of the quality of one's own mind. So particularly when speaking about the visualization of deity and the selectional mention of the deities, in other words, the practice that is involved in visualization of deity and the selection mentions, as we find in the stages, the generation stage of the generation stage practice, are all actually visualized and by emanating through one's own mind. Everything that selection mention and the deities within that selection mentions are all emanated through one's own mind.
That Sanjay and Yan check go by Hayi Jung Yons Zoba Nolola, and the part of the Shimbato, the Tony and Judan, any last of a passage on the Sombate, and the young Jung Sen on the Daniel or Sondoa.
So here now, this is, whenever we engage in the practice, one's practice must be understood, the developments of one's own mental quality. So here, therefore, even when you are engaging in the practice of sacred mantrayana, but the practice of six perfections and 37 aspects of the path to enlightenment and 16 emptiness and so forth will be, remind, time and again, even when you're engaging deeply into the practice of the sacred mantrayana.
There never been never chamber, and so the big Lama Mumba Tower King and the Yoro. And Shanghai is young like Jihes on the Set Tombo Shuji in the meadow, make it Timon Lanzala, Chemogo, Chegogo Mari saying in the Machine, the Chase in Pemochumara.
So there have been many previously in Tibet that once you already transcended yourself on the path of the sacred mantrayana, then practice of the perfections, such as the practice of 37 aspects of the path to enlightenment and so on, are not necessary, which is completely wrong. So let's take 10 minutes break here. May all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions bless me to be able to do this.
Dagi Chini Sabi Gyawa De Don Joa Kyuna Kabe Jaba Juzun Losan Jaba Yi Dembe Jimbo Jendu Seji Shu Sa Jimbe Joje Mendu Zhang Jizhou Lin Jin Jin De Jimba Sanje Shindu Min De Be Wai Rogu Na Do Xin La Shu Ba Shu Jia Wa Kun Do Yang Da Na Zhenmian Chu Ji Be La Long Xue Ji Sa Da La Ju Yun De Ra Zo Ne Do Ju Chang Ge Go Yun Do Shu Ye Dang Gu Ru Min Zhe La Ga Na Ya Da Ya Mi De Ne Ren Do Be Le Zong Ni Kata yamba kanshi saba de lomi mare kedon jovano nanjin jaye ombo daju ji dama sumbi sero kyudo yang jambe yangju tsebe jizone Yoda tsebe changye tage ji roye ye je minba se shen jaye tenpa yurin zinju ji tenpa rinchen choge ma chaba cha chan nyamba jubi shodene ninje chenbu yira chuba ye pende dede sewa sheba shu sejen jaye mi Zhōng zhēnē lē zhō zhāng zhō lāng zhē rīng bē zhōng tāng dē nāng zhē yē lāng bē dē shīn jā yuē zē bā rīng dō jiong zhē jī nāng zhāng zhō bē tian jian zhō xie jī gē jian sī jī mē dāng mē mē gī sē rā gyōng dō jā yuē mā bā yī nāng dāng lāng dāng zhē wā mā zhō jī Anze teba chola chushen je, zijen chola zhenpa dewe ce, tu den na je dado zhuxie jin, zhaxie jiang zi shu gun chao ju je, ju zhen la mian ge ce ra den. Nanga chene shoje jeba no, lo zang denbe zheme sa song je, ro ye men se da do nian jo je, gang zhe zhang ge guo yue xian gang su, pen da de wa ma lian jiong yue ne, xin re zhen wang de zhe jia zuo ye, xiao bei sin de ba do dian ju ji, jiang bei ba yue ji da jian ma dong, gun du zang bo dian yang de jian de, de da gun ji ji si da lo shi, ge wa de da dang ji rao du mo, du zong xi bei jia wa dang ji, ma ma gang la qiu du ma ba de, da jian ge yue za wan de gen jiang, zong bo xi xi rao du mo wan ji. 哎呀，对不起呢。